You know, your upbeat attitude is a life preserver for people. I mean, they hold on to that. Sometimes they cling to that when they have nothing else, and if they didn't, they would sink. And so that's why a mentor must really guard attitude. Man, if you're getting negative and short-tempered and all that, man, isolate yourself and get your act together. Because now we're talking about the sword cutting both ways. While your words of optimism, while your words of encouragement can be so uplifting because they look up to you so much, your criticism or thoughtlessness becomes devastating for the same reason, because they look up to you so much. If somebody calls you a loser and you think they're just a fool and they're a jerk, it doesn't mean much to you. If somebody you look up to somehow communicates they think you're a loser, it blows you away. And so we've got to be careful with this, right, very sharp sword that we have out, and make sure that we're cutting where we want to cut and not cutting where we don't want to cut. So here we are. What are we doing? Living by the highest standards, setting an excellent example, both our business and personal life. We're mastering the material. Be positive and optimistic. Next one, you've got to look for the best in people. One of the things a mentor does is constantly focus on the best. It doesn't mean you don't identify areas you got to work on, but you more often than anything else are constantly reflecting back to the person you're mentoring that the best in them, praising the best, strengthening that. If they have some huge character flaw, like they keep hitting the people on their team, then you got to address that, right? You can't ignore some serious thing. But we all have our little quirks and impatience and stuff we got to learn, and we've got to be on top of it. And with that thought in mind, we need to be as patient as we possibly can also. And that patience becomes such a big deal in people really seeing that you believe in them. You know, and one of the things I should have put up there is our ability to believe in people. And that's kind of what I mean by looking for the best. But I'd probably put another bullet point just to emphasize it. We've got to look for the best. We've got to believe in them, believe in their ability to grow, believe in their ability to change. If we get hard-hearted and say, hey, people don't change and leopard doesn't change his spots, that's nonsense. If people couldn't change, none of us would have any hope in life. All of us change. We can continue to change. Has nothing to do with age, has to do with attitude and our willingness to grow and learn, and which are two critical things in self-improvement. And so we look for the best. We're being patient with them, right? And by the way, you'll never be perfect in all of this, but this is the standard we hold up for ourselves. This is what we're striving to be and become, because that's where mentoring improves our lives. It did cause me, and it continues to cause me to become more patient. It built and reinforced the habit of looking for the best in people. Because of the responsibility I felt, I knew I had to work harder on being more positive and optimistic and really being on top of my game. All of this stuff, to pay attention to my example. You know, I mean, all of these things, I mean, how I treat Cindy in public, the way our children conduct themselves, all of that became part of the mentoring or my brand, if you will, of being a mentor, and whether people listen to me in the areas that I'm talking to them about. One of the other things as a mentor that a great mentor must is you have to have done everything you're asking others to do. That's one of the great things about our system. You can be in a lot of corporate environments where quote-unquote corporate mentors are asking you to do things they've never done. Right here, since we all started at the bottom, you know, almost all of us started at training rep. I sure did. Everything I ask people to do and coach them and challenge them on, I've done. And so that's a powerful, we call it moral authority, position of moral authority. And it's one of the things that almost all of you have in one form or another. Even my friend Gordon had taken the test and passed it. And so what he was asking me to do, he had done. And so it's little things, but it counts. And the last one, and if you know me, you know I'm going to end up talking about this. You got to be worthy of trust. A great mentor must be worthy of trust. Again, you had to pick that one. It kind of embraces all the others above it. They trust you to know. They trust your example. They trust your standards. They trust you to look for the best in them, to be positive, and to be patient. They trust us to do the right thing, right? To put their interests ahead of our own. That's what a mentor does. Takes time from a busy life and gives, right? And so that's what people are trusting us to do as mentors. All right. Next one is you got to be involved in people's lives. Now I hear people say you shouldn't do that either. I got nothing to say to that, except I think it's a mistake. Now, I'll get back to what over-involved means, okay? So I think that's a lie. In fact, I think sometimes when people talk about that, they're talking about over-involvement. But look, in order to help people change, you got to get involved in their lives. First thing you got to do is build quality personal relationships. You see, I love the little icon to the right there, where the red puzzle piece is going in the middle that fills in the gap. That's our job as a mentor, to kind of, where for a while so much revolves around our piece of the puzzle. In time, as the mentee, and that really is a word, we looked it up, is learning from the mentor and grows. Because I remember once talking to someone who had been my mentor for several years. And I said to him, man, I appreciate your mentoring. He says, Rich, I'm not mentoring you. Not now. I haven't mentored you in a while, maybe a year, almost 2. You simply call me now and run the game plan that you have in your head by me. And we talk and kick it around. And as you run it by me, you get clear on how you want to do it. You think of some things. You trust me to reflect some good things back and maybe say, hey, did you ever think of this? Or watch out for that. And he says, basically, we're masterminding, which, by the way, is the level above mentoring, where you're now a mentor-level player yourself. You have mastered, right, the material, and now you're talking with other people who have mastered the material, and you're brainstorming how to be great at what you do. And that's a different level of play. We're not going to talk about that a lot more than what I just talked about right then. But as we involve ourselves in people's lives, we got to build quality personal relationships. Our bottom line is that we want to help people get better, and all of that. And it's and getting better is getting better, and I mean across the board in their life. And we've got to help people make good decisions. And this process, right, of the relationship, people really know you like them, you care about them, you appreciate them, you enjoy them, respect them. You know, all of that causes people to listen to us. And again, that's a great responsibility. You know, and then we're able to work on, is that the way you wanted to handle that? You know, I'd gotten called from Mentor. I'd once gone and done a school, and I said some things. I'd come from California to the South, to Georgia, and I kidded the Georgians about the South, and I actually used a line where I thought it was funny, but it wasn't. And you know, I said, hey, I hear the South is going to rise again, but I'm a student of history, and I can't remember where the South rose the first time. You know, anyway, not a good moment for me. And I wish I had time to develop that whole story and how bad I did. And I got a call from a guy named Art Williams, who was the one that invited me to do this particular school. And he coached me through something very simply. He said, look, Rich, what you said was said in humor. I know that. And about a third of the people in that room thought it was funny. Another third didn't care much one way or the other. And another third got offended and basically was going to filter everything you said from then on and tune you out because they didn't like you for what you said. If you hadn't said it, they all would have been hanging on every word you had to say because of your performance in the business. So think about what you say. You need to challenge people. And he says, you know, I've made this mistake a bunch of times. That's how I've learned. He says, but if we're going to help people get better, they're going to have to be able to listen to us, and we can't go around offending them, or it's not going to work. That was good mentoring. He was helping me make good decisions and reflect on a bad decision, and then in such a way that I would go, okay, I don't want to do that again. Did I do it again? I'm sure, a couple of times, but I kept getting better. And it's amazing how much I filter what I say today. I'll be talking, I'll think about saying something, and years ago I would have said it, and now I go, no, I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it that way. We were preparing this webinar, and I threw a couple of things up there, and Trevor and I, my son-in-law and I, were discussing, and now let's find a better way to say that so that people don't jump to the wrong conclusion. That's the kind of stuff we help people do. We work with our words. Almost exclusively, we work with our words. And so it is very much the role of a mentor to be involved in coaching people on how they say things. All right. Now, when it comes to making good decisions, the fourth thing is we got to live right to be happy. I made some of these points when I was training at the convention. And so this is the involvement in people's lives I'm talking about. You know, and if you're not living right, you're not going to be happy. It could be matters of health. It could be matters of behavior. It could be matters of spirituality, you know, or morality. And you've got to address that. You've got to wade into it. Nothing's protected from a good mentor's coaching. Why? Because all that stuff affects how you're going to do in the business. Now, let's talk about over-involvement. Is there a place you draw the line? Yeah, let's think about it. One, don't get in over your head. In other words, you got someone that husband and wife in the business, and their marriage is a freaking disaster, you know, and it's crazy, and they both have some deep-rooted problems. That, you guys, that's quicksand. You don't know. You haven't been trained. Guide them to professional help, people who've studied for years or decades and have lots of experience handling wacky people, you know, that are a little bit off, a couple bubbles off plumb, a few cars short of a full deck, a few bricks short of a full load. Okay, I'm done with my analogies for that, right? You've got to know when to step back from something. And you'll know, it's like you go, holy, I have no idea what I'm doing here. And that's, don't keep forging ahead. You'll probably do as much harm as you do good. You know, when you get to that point in anything, ask for help. Ask for help. I'm going to tell you a story of a bunch of us in leadership in the first company I was in, kind of at the EPC level, and we went to this meeting, actually it's in Palm Springs, and the president of the company stood up, and he gave a talk I'll always remember because of how good it made me feel. You could feel the same thing emanating from all the other leaders in the room, because we did have a philosophy in that company of being involved in our people's lives, of having these relationships. These people meant a lot to us, and people were coming to us with every problem you can imagine, and you end up spending too much time, frankly, with people that are really a disaster. And it's interesting because we're not a church, and so here's some things that you're not supposed to be. Here we go. You're not a psychologist. You're not a banker. Now, what does that mean? When people come in and ask to borrow money from you, you say no. Occasionally, I've given money, but I don't lend. It overwhelmingly just enables them to last a few months longer being done with their money, and then they're dead broke again and need to try and borrow some more or borrow from somebody else. I say no, but I'll help you organize yourself. I'll help you figure it out. I'll help you make the tough decisions. I'll encourage you through it, but you've got to assume responsibility for your personal financial situation. I'm not a bank. I don't loan money. If I did, you're probably at poor risk. You know, they're just scenario. You just can't get in that business because you'll never make enough. You'll always have lots of broke people around you, lots of broke people joining the team, one of the motivations for a lot of us are for starting in the business in the first place. And you're not a marriage counselor. Now you may do some coaching on, hey, be nicer. Hey, go get flowers, everybody, for Valentine's Day, and get a couple of cards for your sweetheart. And encouraging them to do that. They yell at their wife in a public setting. Talk to them about not criticizing each other in public like that. It's always a really bad thing to do in a marriage. There's some common sense stuff that you do, just like there's kind of common sense psychology, and there's certainly common sense coaching on how to handle your financial situation. But you're not a psychologist, banker, marriage counselor, or a lot of other things. Don't get in over your head. Be involved, but don't be overly involved. One of the sayings I started to write down was, we got to focus on the stronger people, not the weaker people. And I didn't write it down because I didn't want you to misunderstand it. I didn't want that to just sit on a slide when people looked at it in the future and not understand. Our task, I once had it explained to me this way. If you had a certain amount of money, you have a limited amount of money and you want to invest it, and there's one account that you knew for some reason was going to earn you 15%, one that was going to earn you 10, and one that was going to earn you 5, where would you put your money? And everybody answers, obviously, that they put it in a 15% account. The same is true for me in mentoring. I'm going to mentor where I am confident I'm going to get the highest rate of return. And I get approached, and I am working on a solution. I'm actually working with Ed Milet on a solution to increasing our reach of our mentoring in people's lives. Because people come up to me, it's just a parade at like places like the convention, and will you mentor me? You mentor me, and I just individually, I just don't have time, And so, I mean, I need to make about 30, 40, 50 calls a day, handling what I'm handling now, along with the stuff that just jumps into my day, and I'm always playing catch up, and so I've got to, there's only so much you can do. And so over-involvement also means where you commit to too much mentoring, and then people are mad at you because you're not talking to them. So you got to pick your spots and know when to say no. And so the way I ended up saying it is here. Invest in those who will give you a return. And that's what I meant with that. That's why I explained it before I put it up there. I didn't want you to jump to a conclusion and not understand what I do. I'm one person, you're one person, we have limited amounts of time, we have our families, we have our faith, we have this other stuff that we do that's important to our happiness, and we've got this other block of time that we're devoting to our business and to our coaching and mentoring of people in their lives, and you've got to make sure with that limited amount of time that you get the greatest return you possibly can from it. And so choose your mentees wisely. All right, we had this picture that we found on this slide, this next slide, and you have to see it. It was actually titled Bad Parenting. And so you got this mama duck with a little duckies, and I suspect this is photoshopped, but the reality is it is perfect for the business. Step 1, you've got them all following you. Step 2, you're going through the tough areas of the business. Step 3, you turn around, and they all disappeared, And so some of you have experienced this. I've certainly experienced it with individuals. Part of our responsibility, here it is. I've said it this way for years. In every area of your life, be the kind of person, if someone follows you and copies your example, they can win big and be happy. If they copy how you treat your spouse, they'll have a happy marriage. If they copy how you raise your children, they can raise good, healthy, happy children. Right? If they copy how you do a close or respond to somebody when they're struggling, right? If they copy what you do and follow that example, that they'll be able to win. Right? And so that's why we've got to clean up bad behaviors. Because if you're a jerk and they copy you being a jerk, they're going to lose, just like you're going to lose. And so that's where it comes down to that big, capital letter word, responsibility, the big R word. All right, that's mentoring. Now let's talk about what not to do from a standpoint of being mentored. And this is important to pay attention to. Don't, ready? 1, waste your mentor's time. I'll give you an example real quick of time I wasted my mentor's time early on in my career. I had all these things I wanted to talk about. They're kind of in a little bit of a jumble in my head. And then I picked up the phone, I called, and he answered the phone, and my mind went blank. Hi. And he goes, how you doing? Good. What can I do for you? Well, how you doing? You know, it's just like, what an idiot, right? So as a mentee, I was a moron in that moment. And so I resolved to never let that happen again. And I kept and in my spiral notebooks, I always have spiral notebooks, in the back, I would put the questions in a special area, a couple of pages, I would put the questions I wanted to ask my mentor. And so when I got on the phone, I went boom, 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 and got it handled. I just had a conversation with John Pham, and I do more masterminding with John Pham than I do mentoring because of his experience level. But he went through some stuff, boom, 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 and I really appreciated it. You know, I love the way he and I interact. I mean, I was talking to someone else, another good friend of mine, a friend I cherish named Frank Schoen in Chicago, and he went through some stuff. We talked a couple nights ago, boom, 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 he went through stuff. And I just appreciate that. You know, in fact, I complimented him on the way he handles himself. And that was a bigger compliment than just not wasting my time. But that was included in it too. Here's another thing not to do. Don't ask for coaching and then ignore it. I had a guy come into me, this guy, a personal recruit of mine, and he actually came to my house, and we worked together in the church too. And so we went into my home office. He sat down, and he said, man, a couple of things I want to run by you. And he ran by the situation and said, how would you handle it? And I said, well, I think, I think it'd be a good idea if you did this and tried that, and did that, and that, and that, and that. And he goes, I don't think I want to handle it that way. I said, okay. And then he said, what else do you have? He said, well, and then he goes through something else. I get, situation here, here, here. I said, okay. And so I tried again. I said, do this, 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 this. I don't know. I just don't, we're different. I just don't see myself handling it that way. I said, that's great. And I stood up, and he stood up. I put my arm around him. I walked him down the hallway and out the front door and back to his car, told him I loved him, and he got in his car and drove away. And it's interesting because he's a pretty bright guy. And he calls me back in about 15 minutes. And he goes, I was just thinking about our conversation, how I ran a scenario by you, gave me advice, and then I basically said, no, I wasn't going to follow it. And then I did it again, and you coached me, and then I told you I wasn't going to follow that either. And next thing you know, I was driving away. I'd been gone 10 minutes, and it finally dawned on me I hadn't, what I'd done. And this guy was a hard-headed guy. He used to play hockey without any kind of headgear, and I think it ultimately affected him. That's for you Canadians, wear your headgear. And so it's, I guess if you do the, what is team for? I guess you do curling, you don't have to wear that stuff. But anyway, the bottom line is, if you're going to ask for coaching and then ignore it from a mentor, they're good. They're going to be a good person and deal with it because they've faced that. They've given advice people have ignored for years. So I'm used to it. I don't take it personally, not even a little bit, right? But I don't think about wanting to spend any more time coaching that person because it's wasting my time, and it's useless. I don't burn my money either, right? I deposit it. All right. By the way, don't ask questions that can be answered by Google. Trevor put that one up, and I loved it, right? Don't ask questions that can be answered by Google. The little nonsense stuff, the little stuff that so many people can answer. Don't go to your mentor with like, I could go, should I have golf clubs when I play? What? Shut up. Shoo. Go, because there are 1,000 people that can answer those questions. And so people sometimes come to me with that and I say, look, you ask your other leaders about that kind of stuff. That's, because lots of people can do that, right? You gotta ask me questions that you're not getting answered anywhere else. Here's another thing. Don't expect your mentor to be just burning up the phone lines calling you. I put down 30 to 40 times, and I'm serious. I probably called my mentors 30 to 40 times for every one time they called me. I never waited for them to call me. And I don't mean that I always got through. I mean, sometimes I called them 3, 4, 5 times before I got through. And by the way, when it did take me several times to get through, now I'm going to say a really good mentor is very busy, has a full life, right, because of how successful they've been. So they have lots of people wanting a piece of them. And so sometimes I measure someone's seriousness by whether they continue to call. Right? Or they get on the phone, look, I've called you 3 times, you haven't called me back. What's the deal? I don't feel the love in that. You know how much I don't want to call them in the future? Right? It's not a test. It's about getting mentored. Reach out, keep reaching out, do what you need to do. I never once resented that my mentors were hard to get a hold of. If they hadn't been, they probably wouldn't have been worthy of being the mentor that I want them to be. It's a thought. It's something you need to think through. I've had people, I actually listened to someone I was walking along, it was at a convention years ago, and I came up, and this particular guy said to my mentor who I was walking and talking with, oh, and he called him by name. He said, it figures you're spending time with Rich. Well, you probably call Rich 3 or 4 times a day. No, he may have said, you can probably call Rich every day, don't you? And my mentor was very patient with him, and because this was a good guy, but he just didn't have the right attitude. He said, you know what, you may not believe this, but I almost never call Rich. And that's when I stepped in the conversation. I said, he doesn't have to call me. He always knows I'm going to be calling him. I've laughed about this for years. I've said, when my mentors thought of calling me, they always thought to themselves, no, he'll be calling me in a minute anyway. Right? And so I'm the one that needed the coaching, right? I'm not like, anyway, does that make sense? I hope it does. And part of this is don't be overly sensitive. Not just in that situation, but some of the coaching. If you're just a little tender heart, little baby, a little pansy poo, then mentoring is going to be a little hard on you because it's about changing, it's about getting better, it's about growth, and you gotta step up and bring your A game, right? You gotta not expect it. Don't expect it to be easy, right? But you can only expect it to be worth it because this is going to help you so much. And the last one is don't expect to become a great mentor without having been a great mentee, right? Because you got to coach people on how to be mentees. In other words, how to be mentored. That's part of mentoring. And how are you going to do that if you haven't been a great learner in your own right? All right? They say great leaders are always great followers. I understand what that meant. That the great mentors have also been great at being mentored. That's how they got where they were. I am a product of my mentors. And by the way, one of my great, great mentors of them all is my wife, Cindy. Anyway, okay. Now, so that's what not to do. And here we go. What to do. You ever seen this sign? They have them in stadiums. Only coaches and players allowed beyond this point. I was once by a head football coach in the NFL. It was actually the Dallas head coach back then. His name was Barry Switzer, and he called me and said, I'm going to give you and your son, and I had my oldest boy, Brett was teeny tiny and infant at that point, Richard, and he said, I want to give you passes for the game, for the sidelines, which is thrilling because they were playing the 49ers, our team. We just couldn't wear our team's colors. But these were passes that allowed us to go everywhere. I remember we walked up to this certain gate, and they go, oh, no, you don't come in here. You go in the players' entrance, the players and coaches' entrance. And I remember my chest kind of sticking out going, yeah, of course, as I turned to my son. We go in at the coaches and players' entrance. And we walked around to that and like hallowed ground, places nobody gets to go. And we're on the sidelines with the owner and his friends. you know, Jerry Jones. It was an awesome day. I left there with a great sportsman. My 10-year-old turned into a sportsman that day. But the point is, this is something that's a big deal. When you get someone who is willing to mentor you at that level to be the total game changer, right? You got to understand that's pretty special stuff. So here's what to do. 1, be ready and willing to learn. Next, have a positive attitude. Next, be ready to work. 4th, answer their calls. Now, sometimes you're obviously going to be at something real important. But the guys I like mentoring the most will say, hey, I'm in an interview. Is there a time I can call you back? I really want to talk to you. Sometimes I'll chase a guy. I have to chase a guy around to talk to him. Well, if I have to do a lot of that, I find myself calling other people who answer their phone. I'm just giving you tips. Just trying to coach you here. Some of you listening on this are people I try to mentor. Probably a good thing. Next thing, accept their feedback and act on it. I mean you have to be blind. And that's where you got to be careful who you have as a mentor. Please make sure they know the game and they care about you. Right? And if you don't understand something, ask questions and go back and forth. Right? But especially early on, before you even know what you're doing, accept the feedback and act on it. I didn't always understand why I needed to be doing what I was doing, but I did it. I did it so effectively that my mentor one day, I've been in the business about, well, a little over 3 years. The year before I made $400,000, and I asked him, one of the favorite things I do is get my mentor one-on-one. I always got him one-on-one. And for my serious conversation, I said, what do I need to do now? And he looked me straight in the eye and says, I think it's important at this point, Rich, you begin to understand what it is you're doing. And for a moment I thought, did I just get insulted? And then in a flash, the understanding came through. I was kind of like painting by numbers, where I'd learned to dance with the footprints on the floor in numbers. And it was kind of mechanical. I didn't understand why it all worked the way it worked. I just did it because I knew it worked. It's kind of like you drive a car, but you don't understand why it works, or the law of physics about it when you're racing it, or what happens underneath the engine. And he was saying it was time for me to become broader in my understanding and my insight. And he then began mentoring me on all of that. And so I accepted that feedback, and I acted on it. And I became a better student. And so I could progress from just kind of knowing what to do to why we did it that way, right? So I could become a great mentor in my own right in time. All right. Next thing is you gotta. I'm gonna give a shout out right now to Eric Olson. Eric implements at the speed of instruction. You know, I thought I was good at this, and I was. I mean, I got coaching. I implemented it. I was thinking, well, I'll do it this way all day the day before. Then my mentor called and said, do it this way, and it was like I never did it any other way. And I watched that mentor do it the same way. You know, and I tell you, I'll sit down with Eric. We'll go through stuff. Some of it, and we're at a level, some of our stuff is masterminding, but then some of it still is a little bit of mentoring, and then boom, I'll call back a couple of days later, and he's 25 miles down the road, or 100 miles down the road. And that's one of the keys to his success. Yeah, it's just the only delay in Eric's career early was finding a mentor. Right? Someone who really did spend that time. I love that relationship I have with him because he's all these things: ready and willing to learn, positive attitude, ready to work, answers my calls, accepts feedback, acts on it, implements at the speed of instruction. There are others that are that way. Penny's been wonderful that way. I mean, a bunch of other relationships I've had. Ed Milet over time, working with Swan in the early part of his career. He's way past that need now. But, these kinds of things have been wonderful relationships, and they've all had these trademarks during the critical time. Right? Next, be prepared with notes and questions. And you want to be, you want to be kind of fun to be around for the mentor to spend time with you. I've tried to diminish in my life my desire to have people feel grateful for things I do. So if you're just doing things in the hope that they'll be grateful, you're going to be unhappy a bunch of times. And because lots of times people just don't know how to say thank you, but we still need to do those things for them. But when you want to develop a long-term relationship of mentoring and coaching, it's important you cultivate an attitude of gratitude, right? They feel some of that. And I think of the people that I call most easily, it's the ones that are the most positive, they're most appreciative, and they're more fun to be around, right? Another thing a mentor is going to look for in you is that you are personally responsible and accountable for the things that are happening, right? That you take that responsibility. I was talking to Sean and Jamie, who have been wonderful in that relationship, in past years with Cindy and I and them. And one of the things that they are is responsible and accountable. As I was working with them this time, I said, look, I'm just your advisor. I'm just your consultant. It's up to you to decide exactly how you're going to implement in some of the details, do some of that stuff, and they're all over it, right? They are personally responsible and accountable. And they have that attitude. They have all these things, and they're others. And I don't mean to leave anybody out, but I've had some of these special relationships through the years that I cherish. They have been, in their way, the single most rewarding thing in the business, other than the gift of self-improvement that came to me and our family, right? After that, the most rewarding thing has been these relationships. And so I also challenge you, if you are fortunate enough to get a quality mentor, to value the relationship. Potentially, when you think about it, it's worth millions. But more important than that, it's worth all kinds of quality of life. It can be worth, and it can end up being worth a great marriage. It can end up being worth great, happy, morally grounded, strong children. It can, as well as then you ripple, what you learn out through the lives of others, impacting generations and affecting thousands or tens of thousands, or maybe one day millions. What an unbelievable privilege that is. All right, next one. As we wind up here, mentoring is a joint venture. It's our last slide. It's a special partnership. And the mentee has the responsibility to initiate it most of the time. And though the mentor will call, and talk about certain things at certain times, like Art called me after I made that bonehead mistake at a fast start school, right? But let's talk about it. You need to, in your relationship, define it. In other words, it's as I was working with mentors, I said, is it okay that I'm calling? Is this something that you want? What I was doing is defining the relationship between a man and woman. Trevor called it DTR. He immediately says that was something that he and his friends, when he's in college, we're Mormons and we're all about getting married, and there's a lot of getting married in college at BYU, and they would talk about, so-and-so's girlfriend is having the DTR conversation. They're defining the relationship. Where are we going with this? What does it mean? and you knew the guy was going to come back with a girlfriend that was in a more serious relationship or having lost one, right, during the DTR process. And so defining the relationship is important, because sometimes I had somebody come up to me very specifically at the convention and it made my heart hurt, and they said, they handed me the card, will you mentor me? And I wanted to, but there was no way I could. And it bothered me. It's still bothering me now. I don't like saying no, but I learned I had to. So I defined that relationship right then with that denial, that reluctant denial, that I couldn't do it. And so I'm mentoring now in the company with these webinars, part of what I'm striving to do to manifest it. And so there you are. And I think you need to work on, this is simple logistics, contact and response times. There are times where I get a text from someone I'm working with, and it's easy to say, hey, I'll be available at this time, and we get a time set, and then we follow it up. All right? And so you have contact and response times because you're both running and gunning. It's important that you have periodic personal meetings. You know, I've had a ton of effective stuff done over the phone. I don't need to be in person. And that is a form, of course, of a personal meeting, not going back with text or email or leaving a voicemail, where it's interactive and live. And that's really what I'm talking about. But occasionally, there's nothing like that one-on-one or a couple with a couple. And like Cindy and I like to do it when we can. And that's pretty special. And things tend to move ahead, both in the quality of the personal relationship and in the coaching that's being done. Here's another critical area to remember. Keeping confidentiality. Sometimes a mentor will confide things in you. You got to keep your mouth shut. You know, at the same time, you'll be confiding things to the mentor, and the mentor's got to know how to keep confidences. All right? Because in coaching, I'm going to get to know personal stuff about you, and the other people don't deserve to know. They're sometimes told me in the strictest confidence. And maintaining that's a big deal. And I do it. And so does Cindy. And we're good at it. And it's part of what helps us mentor others effectively. Next one is honest feedback going both directions. You've got to be able to tell your mentor what the story is. I have no idea how sound comes back into this. We hit mute again. We just hit it again. And so honest feedback, in other words, if I ask you a question about what's really going on in your team, your organization, or your interaction, or in your marriage for that matter, that honest feedback is going to give me what I need to help. And so if you're hiding stuff or keeping stuff or you're embarrassed about it, well, that's not going to work very well. And so that's where the confidentiality thing comes first. You know I'm going to keep it confidential. You talk to me about anything. And so then that honesty is going back and forth. And then there are goals, and then there's accountability. You know, last one. There we go. And all this is part of that joint venture. You define the relationship. You have contact and response times. You're going to have periodic personal meetings over the phone and time in person. You're going to keep confidentiality. You're going to be honest. Your feedback both directions. You're going to have goals and accountability. That means I'm going to be extending challenges to you, and you're accountable for that response. And then for both mentor and mentee, bring all your passion. I love working with people who are passionate about winning, passionate about a well-lived life, passionate about doing it big, and changing as many lives as they can reach. That's a big deal, and it's wonderful. All right, let's look at what's going on. That's my story about mentoring. I hope it's of some value to you. And being mentored, it is if you'll use it. Our next webinar is going to come back to a subject that, again, is another trademark of all giants, and that's great teamwork in the home. And we're going to talk about world-class partnership. Cindy and I are going to do that together. I think we did one a while back. Actually, it's a span of years. I can't believe how long I've been doing these already. And but we want to revisit that. We have moved our partnership to an even higher level in the world-class category, in my opinion. And where we're waking up in the middle of the night, right around 4 o'clock this morning, we were talking about people and individuals and what to do and how to handle it and how to be balanced ourselves with all the commitment that we have in our lives to people. And I'm so grateful for the quality of partnership that we have. Something I said to her this morning, I'm in charge of being a maniac, and she's in charge of being balanced. And by the way, her role is more important than mine, right, in this scenario. And that's, being a maniac's important for the business, but her balancing me for our happiness, for our health, for the example we need to set, for the quality of our marriage and family life, for our spirituality, all these things I just rely on her for. That's a world-class partnership. We want to talk to you about that. So this would be a good one to have couples on, you know, to have both husband and wife on. Hey, being on it's the important thing, but if you can both be on it, I think it might help. I think it might bless your partnership, bless your relationships, bless your marriage, bless your family, all of which we consider the highest of privileges. So that's our next webinar. Now, by the way, that's on the wrong day, October 9th. I didn't catch it. It's October 23rd. 23rd. Can we correct that right on the spot? Here we go. I love technology. Here we come. There we go. October 23rd. I told you. What's that October 9th stuff? And so October 23rd, we moved a little bit later because I'm in Atlanta. And first Wednesday I'm in Atlanta. Second Wednesday I'm in Atlanta for SMD Academies. Then I'm in Salt Lake City. And then my first available one's the 23rd. And I couldn't have done it the 30th because that's the day before Halloween, and I'm sewing my costume. So obviously I'm kidding. I'm not a sewing mentor. I hope you got good things out of this. Like I say, I take this stuff seriously. I take it seriously that you're on it. And I can't believe how many sites we have nowadays getting on this thing. I'm glad we didn't blow up our technology this time. And like we did last time after the convention, I'll be ready for that next time after the convention with, you know, with something that'll take 3,000 spaces. And this time we stayed under 1,000 locations. But it's, thank you for being on it. Thank you for taking the time to spend with us on this. We appreciate you. And I finish it as always. Thanks for being in business with us. And I do consider it one of the great privileges of my life. Thanks, everyone. Until the 23rd. Talk to you next.